Okay, so welcome to this mini podcast. It's an introduction to Excel, and in this session, we're going to go through some basic tools and some basic tricks that you can use to run some data analysis and make the most of perhaps some data you collect in a module or doing your research or your research project. So it's going to go at a reasonably slow pace. So if you're new to Excel, hopefully you'll be able to keep up. If you're an old hand at Excel, it'll give you, I hope, a little bit of insight into some additional functionality. What we won't do in this session, we won't be using the function keys. So if you want to learn about the function keys, I'll put up another podcast to show you how you can, in essence, have a faster way of working with Excel. Today we're going to be doing it, so we're going to be using basically the mouse function and showing you where on the ribbon at the top of the screen you can access all of the functions we're going to be going through. So, in the session today, what we're going to cover is how to create some basic maths functions. So you're going to have to, over the next years at your university, or even going beyond university, you're probably going to have to create things like means and standard deviations, coefficients of variation, and so on. So I'm going to show you how you can create these using standard formulae that are actually in Excel and get the spreadsheet to do the work for you. Then what I'm going to do is show you a little bit about how you can create some basic maths functions yourself in Excel, so that rather than using something which is in the drop down, creating a formula, because in the end you may be asking Excel to do things that aren't available as standard drop downs. And then finally, within this session, we're just going to show you about the notion of inserting rows and columns. So in other words, what do you do, for example, if you've got another data set that you want to bring in, and you want to drop it in, and what will happen then in terms of the calculations that you've done. Okay. All right, so let's start off with a basic data set. So here we are, we're in Excel, and we've got 3 columns of data here. And this is a simple data set where we've got, in column A, we've got a list of participants. In column B, we've got our VO2 max pre-testing. And in column C, we've got our VO2 max in post-testing. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, which actually isn't really about mathematical functions at all, is you notice that in here, the wordings have disappeared. Now, that might not bother you, but perhaps you've got long phrases or long terminology. So there are a number of ways in which you can amend this. One of the ways you could amend this, for example, is to highlight those columns and change the column width. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight those 3 columns and we're going to right click on the mouse. Then you'll see column width. Click on column width, and at the moment you can see the figure that is selected. I'm going to increase that to make it quite wide. Hit OK, and you see the column widths have now all changed. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you an alternate way. So column width is quite an easy one, and you can do that. For example, I might just want to increase the column width of column C. And I can do that by, again, the same thing, column width. I could change that one to 16, and there I've only adjusted column C. The alternate way is, this time I just want you to highlight the headings. Again, right mouse click. And if you scroll down, you'll see this little section here which says Format Cells. Click on Format Cells. And there's lots and lots of things that you see in here that in fact we'll come back to some of these later on. But what I want you to click on is Alignment. And now what you can do is you can alter the text direction. So this ticker moves here. Now to move this ticker, put your mouse over it, left click, and hold the left button down. So don't let go, and move it. So I'm going to move it to that angle, and then I've let go. And can you see that the degrees are changing? So if I go this way, notice the values are changing, and so on. So you keep the left button down and then let go. Once you've got the angle that you want, hit OK, and there you go. So we've adjusted them within their cell. So we've got them at this jaunty angle. So I'm going to keep them like that as we can see. So let me just change the screen size so we can see everything. So what we want to do now is we're going to run some basic mathematical analysis. So we want to know what the average VO2 max was for our group before they did some training, and what the average VO2 max was for our group after they did some training. Now, we don't need to know the average for the participant. So in this example, we're going to label our data. I'm going to put mean in here. So it now says mean, and I'm going to put the means, that is the averages, into these two cells here. So to do this, as I say, you can use shortcuts, but we're going to show you the slightly longer way, but I think it's a way which is less complicated and prone to errors. So at the top, you see that you've got all of these. Now this is called the ribbon, and you can see that you've got all these headers here. So for example, you can click on formulae or page layout and so on. Insert, which a lot of these we will come to in subsequent podcasts, but for the moment, I want you to click on formulae or formula. And notice what you've got here, which is insert function. And so notice what it says, work with the formulae in the context. So, insert function, and what you to do now is left mouse click on insert function. And you'll see that this table appears of all sorts of functions. Now, in here there are alternates. So for example, you've got date and time, all, mathematical, text and so on. What I want you to do is just go into most commonly used. Now, you may find that in your list it's not in the order that I've got here. These are in the most commonly used. So the most commonly used that I've used is average. Scroll down until you find average, okay, and just highlight it. So just left click on it to highlight it. Once you've done that, go to OK, and this additional box now appears for us on the screen. I'm just going to move it over here. What it's now showing you is it's showing you this cell on the screen here. So it says number 1, and it's this cell. So this is where the answer, our average, is going to appear. But we now need to tell Excel what we want the average to be based on. So I want you to click on this dialog box here. So to click on it and to access this, again, left mouse click. And notice the dialog box now collapses. Now what I want you to do is bring your cursor over to the cell. So in this case it's cell B11. Hold down the left mouse button and then drag, holding down the left mouse button, up, in this case, to B2. Don't let go. Once you've done that and you've covered the data that you want to analyze, release the left mouse button. And you'll notice now, in our cell here, it's now highlighting from B2 to B11. Re-expand the dialog box, so go onto this marker here, left mouse click, and can you see this number here has now changed? So it's now showing us the actual value we want. Click OK, and we've got 47.983. So it's given us the average for that data set. So let's just repeat that again. We're going to do it now on the data which is post-test. So click on the cell you want to put the data into, that's left mouse click. Insert function, again, found in the formulae, insert function, left mouse click. Find average, left mouse click on OK. Number, so we're in the first number box here. On the dialog box here, again, left mouse click to collapse it. And now highlight the data that you wish to work with. Left mouse click is held, left mouse button is held down. Drag the mouse up as far as you need it to go, and release the left mouse button. And again, you can see here it's gone from C2 to 11. So notice we're in column C, but we're still going from row 2 to row 11. Left mouse click again on the dialog box to expand it, and click OK. And we've now got a second average score. But actually that's quite a long-winded way around of doing it, and particularly if you've got lots and lots of data where you've got row after row, you don't want to keep repeating that. So let me show you something alternate that you can do. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to do an undo. And I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm going to drop into here some additional data just to show you. It doesn't matter what the data is, but show you what I mean. Now you can do what I'm about to show you, whether you've got 2 columns of data or more than 2 columns. I just think if having a little bit more data will perhaps be useful. So what I'm going to do to give us more data is I'm just going to copy this. Doesn't matter what it is. And I'm just going to drop that data into there. I'm not going to label it because I just want to show you this example. So what we've done is in this column here, in column B, we've got our average. So I'm going to just zoom the screen in a little bit so we can see what we're doing. So that 47.8983 represents the average, as we know, for this column here. But rather than doing that same function, going into the function and doing it, what we're going to do is we're going to drag this formula across these cells. Now the reason we can do that is because the number of rows isn't changing in the data set, and in fact we're just going to put it across. So notice that as I move my mouse around, can you see that the cursor changes, and as I put it onto that little marker at the end, you can see that the cursor goes from a solid plus to this kind of almost like a very small plus sign. Once you've lined it up as a small plus sign, I want you to left mouse click and hold it down, and then just drag across and let go. And notice what it's done. It's worked out the average now for each of those columns. So that was, I'll show you again. Put the cursor onto the marker point. Notice you get different versions of the marker. You get the plus. You get kind of an arrowy one. What we want is this little plus sign like that. That's so easy to find. Left mouse click down, drag your cursor across, and the averages are then produced. Okay. So we're just working with our 2 data sets again. So let me bring that across. So the next thing we want to do, as you'll probably want to do, is you'll probably be asked to do a standard deviation. So in the column below, just type in SD. I tend to refer to standard deviation as SD. You might want to call it whatever you want. We're going to do this the same way. We're going to go into insert function, so find insert function in the formula toolbar, left mouse click. Now standard deviation is listed as stdev, standard dev. So left mouse click on it, left mouse click on OK, and the dialog box appears. Collapse it, left mouse click, exactly as we did for the average. Now be careful, we don't want to include the average in the calculation here, so we're going to start again from, in this case, B11, and drag with the left mouse button held down up as far as we can to participant 1, which is B2. And again, notice now that it is informing us, and you can see it in this bar here, standard dev, B2, B11. Press on the dialog box, again, left mouse click on OK, and now you've got your standard deviation. So remember, we don't need to repeat that function that we've just been going through up here. We can now drag the data across, and we've now got the standard deviation for the 2 columns. Okay. Now, one of the things you want to do, I think, is make sure that you don't confuse the data, so that you don't get confused what is a participant and so on. So just to do that, we're just going to show you very simple thing. Go back to the home screen here, left mouse click down, highlight the data, and you can see the symbol for bold, and just bold the data so that you know that that's separate. It just identifies maybe your own mind. You can change the color, for example. So let's say that you want that data to be really obvious and you want to put it in red. So here's the text color, font color, click red. So we've got it nice and clear. It's nice and obvious what it is. Now, one of the things that you've probably noticed is that the data that's being calculated here looks different to the data in the way it's presented in these columns. In other words, we've actually got it to more decimal places than the data has actually been produced for. Now, when we're working with data, we should only be really presenting data to the number of decimal places to which it was ever collected. So in this case, we collected our VO2 max data to 2 decimal places. So we need to show our data to 2 decimal places. So how do I do that? Well, this is nice and simple. There are a number of ways that you could do this either before or after the event. So I'm going to show you both ways. So this is doing it after the fact. You've run the data and you're looking at the data and you think, crikey, I need to adjust this. So what I want you to do is put the mouse over the cell that you want and then left mouse click down and then just highlight the 4 cells. So notice the arrow is the solid plus, left mouse click, drag over the 4 cells and they're now highlighted. And highlighted in grey. Now, with the mouse over those cells, I want you to now use the right mouse click. And this menu bar that we've seen before now appears. On here, I want you to go into Format Cells. And we've been in here before. Now, because we were fiddling with alignment, earlier alignment is shown, but normally what will happen is it will show number. That's okay. Just click on number. And now we've got this number option here. All sorts of different numbers that are on here and so on, but actually the one we're interested in is the second one down, which just merely says number. So left mouse click on it for me. And you can see that you can alter the decimal places here. So we're going to fiddle around. I want it for 2 decimal places. So make sure it says 2 decimal places. Once you've done that, so use these up and down arrows here. So left mouse click the arrows up and down. Hit OK. And they've all now been adjusted to 2 decimal places. So that works very, very nicely. So I'm going to just show you an alternate approach to this. So in the alternate approach, what we're going to do is I'm going to go backwards. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove all of this data just to show you this alternate approach. So I'm just going to delete those contents there. Right, so imagine that we haven't calculated any of these variables. So at the moment there is nothing showing in those cells and the software doesn't know that it's got to do anything with this data. But I know in advance that my data needs to be to 2 decimal places. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to faff around early on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to left click on 12 and 13. So these are the row numbers. And notice now the whole of those rows have been highlighted. So what I'm going to assume is that if I'm putting any other columns in, this is also going to have the same function. With my mouse over, it doesn't matter, over 12 or 13, right mouse click it. Format cells, left mouse click. Number, 2 decimal places, hit OK. Now, of course, nothing looks like it's happened, but what it's done is Excel now recognises that anything that appears in these rows will automatically be presented to 2 decimal places. So let's see if that's right. So let's remember how we would do the formula. So we're going to go to Formula again, Insert Function, Average, OK, collapse the dialog box, highlight the data, collapse the dialog box, hit OK, and there we go. Look, 47.98, oops, 47.98, and then there we go, 51.52. So you see it's done it to 2 decimal places. So the same for our standard deviation. Again, highlight the data that you want, collapse the box, hit OK, and there we go, 7.96, drag it across, 10.02. So it's automatically worked out that these need to be to 2 decimal places. I'm just going to make those nice and red and bold again so we can see them. So that was all fairly simple to do. Now, let me just show you as a couple of final things that we're going to work with. I want you to imagine now that we've got an extra participant that has suddenly come into the study, or we forgot a piece of data. So we want to insert them into the data set. So we're going to insert both a column and a row to show you how this works. So let's say that you've looked through the data and you've worked out and you think, actually there was a participant that was meant to be here. That number 1 was John, number 2 was Bill, number 3 was Alice, number 4 was Jane. But actually between Alice and Jane, actually we've got another participant. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert a row to put their data in. So to do that, we want to insert a row. So this is very important. To insert a row, you can do it this way, but the best way to do it is actually click on the row that you want to insert it in. So left mouse click on the row. Right mouse click to bring down this menu and just simply click insert. Okay, I'll do that again. Left mouse click on the where you want to put the row in. Right mouse click, this menu appears, click insert, and suddenly it's inserted an additional row. The alternate way that I was mentioning a moment ago is highlight where you want to put the row in. So in this case, I'm not clicking on the row 5, I'm just clicking on the 4 columns where I want to drop this extra row in. Again, right mouse click, insert. Now it offers you something alternate. Now it's saying in our dialog box, which we didn't have before, do you want it to shift the cells down, or do you want to shift left and right? Now, of course, what we want to do is we want to shift the cells down. It's just checking, click OK, and those cells have shifted down. But notice what it's done. Okay, we've inserted. Now we've got to put our extra participant into our data set. So I'm going to call this participant just for this. I'm going to call them participant 3B. Okay, it doesn't matter who they are, and I'm going to now insert some data. Now notice that the values at the bottom haven't changed. They were 47.98 when we started, and they were 51.52. So although we've put data in, the averages haven't changed. But what I want you to do is watch what happens when I start putting data in. So I'm going to put in, they're quite good, so I'm going to, well, let's give them a 55.5. You put the data in, press return, and notice now that the average and the standard deviation have adjusted. I'm going to put some in the second column, and they've gone up quite a lot, 65.45. Again, watch the average and the standard deviation, and they've increased. So that shows you a way in which we can insert a row. It's going to bring that in line with everything else. There we go, as you see. Okay, so the final thing I just want to show you in this kind of inserting is what happens if we've got to insert, say, a row of data, a column of data. So we've put a row in, but imagine that we want to put a column in. And this sometimes happens when you're formatting data and you're trying to get things lined up. So imagine that actually what we've done is VO2 max pre, VO2 max post, but imagine we've actually collected data halfway through our study, and I've forgotten to put it in. Well, there are all sorts of ways in which you could do this. You could, quite simply, highlight the data, select cut, so that was cut, left mouse click on column D, right mouse click, and then select paste. And you see I've pasted it across and it's moved everything across. But that's actually quite a cumbersome way of doing it. Much simpler way. So, insert, and just drop an insert in. And so now what it's done is it's moved this into column D. So I now want to put my data in here. So this is VO2 max mid. And I want us to now pretend that this is this is new data. I'm just going to copy this data in here, paste it in like that. So notice that the average has moved across and the standard deviation has moved across, but I haven't got an average and standard deviation here. That's fine. Just go back and do what we did before. Drag the cell across, drag the cell across, and we've now got our data that we wanted. So the very final thing I'm going to show you in this session is how to create a simple formula. So Excel allows you to create all sorts of very complex formulas and work things out that you might not have normally worked out. But let me show you a very simple formula that you can do. So one of the formula that we often look at in science is what we call a coefficient of variation. And that simply means it's how much variance there is in the data, and it's a percentage. Okay. So how are we going to get Excel to do this? Well, I'm going to tell Excel first of all that I want to work out coefficient of variations. I'm going to label the I'm going to label my cell coefficient of variation CV, and as I did before, I'm going to put it in bold and I'm going to put it in red. So now what I want to do is I want to create the formula. So to create the basic formula, highlight the cell that you want. So left mouse click on the cell where you want to work from, and go to your keyboard and type equals. So you can see the equal sign is there. So now what I want to do is I want to think about what is the sum I want to do. So in this case, the sum I want to do is I want to take the standard deviation, which is 7.64, and I want to divide the standard deviation by the mean, which is 48.67, and I want to multiply that by 100 because I want it to be a percentage. So how am I going to tell Excel how that looks? Well, I could type the numbers in, but if I type just the numbers in, it means I can't copy the formula across. So as we've been copying formulas across from cell to cell, I want to be able to do that here with my formula that I'm going to create. So to do it, I have to think about maths. So I've got to think what goes in a bracket, what doesn't go in a bracket. So in this formula, I'm going to put a bracket in, because the first part is the first sum. So the standard deviation divided by the mean is the first sum. If the brackets weren't there, what would happen is it would do the standard deviation divided by the mean, and then it would multiply the mean by 100. I don't want that. I want the first sum to be multiplied by 100. So I'm going to tell Excel, rather than the numbers, I'm going to tell Excel the cell that I want it to work with. Now there's a number of different ways you could do this. You could type it in, or you could click on the cell that you want. So if I click on the cell, it's gone for B14. I'll just click undo. Or I could type B14. And if I type B14, it does the same thing. It's now highlighted B14. Now I want to divide B14 by B13. So divide is with the backslash, and I want to divide it by B13. So again, left mouse click or type B13. Notice it's in a different colour. But remember, this is one part of the equation, so I need to close the brackets in this example. And the final part of my equation is I want it to be a percentage. So I'm going to type multiply by 100. So I've got B14 in blue divided by B13 in red. That's one sum multiplied by 100. When I'm happy, I either press enter, or you can see this little tick here. Click tick. And now it's done the calculation. So it's worked this out as a percentage. So again, you can see the formula that is sitting here, B14 divided by B13 multiplied by 100. But I don't want to keep typing that across for all of these columns. So again, do what we did. Grab the bottom of your Excel box, drag it across, left mouse click, drag it across, and now you have got the coefficient of variation, or your formula, has been dragged across. And notice, if I click on the cell here, notice now it's saying C14 divided by C13, D14 divided by D13. So the final thing we'll do is tidy it up as a refresher. We're going to go to Format Cells, we're going to click on Number, standard deviation, decimal place is 2, and there we go. So, in this session, what have we done? We've looked at some basic math functions, so we've looked at means and standard deviations. We've looked at how you can create basic math functions using the formula. So we've used demonstration using the coefficient of variation. That will work for any formula that you want to do. You just have to map it out perhaps on paper first and think about what it is that's going into the formula. And then we finally showed you a little bit about inserting rows and columns. In follow-up podcasts, we'll go through how to create interactive tables, how to create graphs. We'll even show you how to create what are called splicers, where you can actually make the table do the work for you and actually start to create interactive information sets.